I'm with the Louisiana Department of Education. I serve as the Assistant Superintendent in the Office of Career and College Readiness. I want to thank you all for coming out this morning and taking the time to discuss this important matter. The meeting has been called to order, and I am going to introduce the chair of this committee, Dr. Sharon Clark. Dr. Clark is a member of our BESE Board, Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. We also have with us at the front table is Mr. Ronnie Morris, who's the president of BESE. Before we call the roll, I do want to say that we do ask that you speak into the mic because this is being live streamed. And so there may be people who are out there in YouTube land who want to hear what is happening. So if you could make sure you pull the mic toward you, speak into the mic so that they can hear it as well. We're going to have Ms. Rayla Hunt to call the roll.
Present.
Ready.
Present.
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 Present. And we have a quorum present. Our next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on January 5th, 2023. That information has been provided to you in the packet that you have at your seats. Want to take a look at that?
Dr. Singleton, after review of the minutes of the previous meeting, I move that we accept.
It has been moved by Mr. Tony Kane that we accept the minutes from the January 5th, 2023 meeting. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Ms. Erin Sims. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Our next thing on the agenda is the consideration of the recommendations of the 2023 STAR Task Force report. Can I get a motion to accept this? Am I doing the right thing? Do I ask for the motion right now? To accept the report. Can I get a motion to accept the report? Ms. Kayla Pagel has moved that we accept the report of the 2023 STAR Task Force recommendations. Do I have a second? I'll second. Ms. Kelly Bonaventure has seconded. So just to give you a little background, in the summer of 2022, Dr. Brumley decided to establish a task force that was to focus on attendance issues as well as truancy, and we were to come up with some recommendations. From June of 2020 through January of 2023, we met several times. We reviewed data, tactics that could take place, tactics that were taking place. We heard from key stakeholders from around the state, as well as entities providing information on data systems during that time. So you can see that on this particular slide, the purpose was to review statute and policy around attendance, discuss barriers, review the data, and take a closer look at chronic absenteeism and data. As a result of that particular task force at that time, we came up with some recommendations that we presented to BESE in 2023. So you should have a copy of that report at your seats as well. We brought policy recommendations in March 2023, but those policy recommendations were not adopted. But despite those policy recommendations that you see listed here not being adopted, we continue to do the work of focusing on initiatives related to attendance. We provided targeted assistance. We created an attendance pilot in Baker, and you're going to hear more about that in just a little bit. We have monthly CWA calls as well as a CWA summit. As when you look at these particular recommendations, we have made some progress on some of them, and we're going to talk about that with the policy update that we adopted at the March 2024 BESI. So even though this did not occur in 2023, over that year time, we continue to show how the changes should occur. And so subsequently, BESI did approve those changes. Are there any questions about the work that we did leading up to basically where we are now? The work that took place with the STAR Task Force in January 2023. And I want to welcome Judge Gail Grover, who is now present with us as well. Right, so we had a motion to accept the report. Is there any opposition to accepting the report? All right, next up, we have the policy that was actually adopted in 2024. And you also have that at your seat. So in March of 2024, BESI approved attendance policy related to the types of absences, daily attendance reporting, and truancy. The policy is out on notice of intent and expected to become a rule on July 20th of this year. So one of the recommendations of the original STAR Task Force was to streamline the types of absences. Our school systems, when they accept a student, when a student comes in and they submit an absence, it could be many different reasons. But those types of absences are not necessarily reported up to us here at the state. There were initially 4 different types of absences that were a bit confusing. We streamlined those down to 3: excused absences, unexcused absences, or suspension expulsion. This does not prohibit local school systems from having many different attendance codes and submitting those attendance codes locally. But what's coming up to us at the state are just these 3. A student is either excused, unexcused, or suspension expulsion. So this is a focus on what we want reported to LDOE, which goes into the other policy that was adopted at the March 2024 BESI is daily attendance reporting. People say, well, why do we at the state level need to get the attendance data on a daily basis? It's because that it will help us to know where students are missing across the state, missing school across the state. At present, we don't get attendance data. We don't have to get attendance data until the summer, until July. That is when we actually know where students are in school, is in July after the school year ends. A lot of times school systems do upload data on a quarterly basis, but they don't have to. So we really we don't know where they are. So this policy provides for that daily attendance reporting. The daily attendance reporting should not be a barrier to school systems. Many of them already do it. The information system is simply talks to our information system each day, and it's just updated in our system. So the question has come up, well, what if a student is absent on Monday? By Thursday, they bring the note saying they're put in on Monday as an unexcused absence. Thursday, they bring a note saying that the absence on Monday was excused. They change it in the system. It's updated in the system that night to us. So it is able to be changed on an as needed basis. So the other question is, some of our smaller charter schools, they may not use the larger information systems that is being used by our traditional school systems. We're actually working with those groups to make sure that this is not a barrier to them as well. We have a group of people who are reaching out to the Charter School Association as well as those schools so we can come together with them so we can see what they're using and how they can better provide this data to us in a way that's not hindering them in being successful. So why this data? This data is important because it's going to provide detail about where students are missing a lot of school. It'll provide just more on-time information to help us identify challenges and provide needed resources and support. So at this time, I'll ask if there are any questions or concerns about the policy that we approved at our March BESI meeting. Yes, sir. Can you state your name?
Good morning. I was in the Thomas Jefferson room like I was told. Nobody showed up at me.
Oh, you must
I
have been
found out,
in
I
room.
found out it moved. Yes, I represent, my name is Frank Pasqua. And I represent the Louisiana Association of Child Welfare and Attendance Personnel. A lot of people call us truant officers. Now, what we want to do, we want to change something in Bulletin 741, which is chapter 11. There's several chapters in Bulletin 741. 2 chapters deal directly with child welfare. And one of them is chapter 11, which is attendance. The other one is discipline, chapter 13. Well, what you want to do is you want to change the definitions. And the reason given to the Bessie Board was for streamlining and brevity. All right? Now, I prepared a little talk. I hope you can bear with me because there are 2 big issues that we oppose with these changes, 2 of them. I'm going to talk about the first one and I'm going to stop. Okay, so there's reasons why we do this. I would like to begin by stating that Bulletin 741 is Louisiana's handbook for school administrators. It's not for parents. It's not for students. It's not even for judges. But it is for school administrators, which are assistant principals, supervisors, directors, and superintendents.
So, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. We do have a 3-minute rule, so if you could limit.
Oh,
your
Lord.
comments. Okay.
That's
thank
my
you.
trouble.
That's okay.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna have to speed it up. Well, the Louisiana Association of Child Welfare and Attendance has always worked with the State Department. We're dedicated, we always did. We oppose the changes to the types of absences and their definitions. It took us 10 years to get the definitions we have right now. And the current absence definitions were revised by Ms. Joan Hunt. She's the general counsel for the LD. And we did this in 2010. It took us 10 years. And we got full definition. Now, sometimes when you streamline and you make things short, you do it for efficiency. In this case, it's the opposite. You're taking away something. You're taking away knowledge. You're taking away things that we need to know about the thing. When you look up a definition, you want to know everything about it. All right? Now I'm going to have to see if I can speed it up. For example, the core of an excused absence, the core of it is that documentation, but not any documentation. Acceptable documentation from a parent is submitted for the absence. And we got to add in a timely manner because a lot of districts give them 5 days. Well, if you look at the definition for excused, you know, it's short and it's very short. And it eliminates a lot of things that we need to know. For example, this is what makes an excused absence excused when the parent turns it in. There's nothing in there that talks about documentation, nothing. Nothing says anything about the parent turning in a note. If the absence counts toward limited number of days a student is allowed to miss, it's not there. He fails or not promoted, it's not there. If, you know, makeup work, it's not there. This information is deleted, and it is the same problem with some of the other definitions. You're taking out what we need to know. So we oppose that. And quickly, my time's running out. I have it all written down here. But the word expulsion was added to suspensions. The other day in April, the Bessie Board had a meeting and they had to approve alternative programs in alternative schools. And the LDAE introduced a law in order to do this. It tells them that it's a revised statute 416.2 that students who are expelled shall attend an alternative program or alternative school or a third party alternative. They cannot go home. They cannot be expelled out of school. So expulsion is not an absence. All right? And when you mark them and they don't show up at the school, you mark them unexcused because truancy prevails. And the only thing that makes an absence truant is unexcused. So it can't be suspension. So we need to eliminate expulsion. I only got 3 minutes, but I'm gonna stop and we can discuss why child welfare opposes these definitions. We want full definition. We want the ones we have, we're happy. And we're not happy with the ones that we have now as being, so we're gonna comment on this to the Bessie Board.
Good morning, and thank you for your comments. And we are looking at the issue that you just brought to us. Just to be clear, so we're clear on what you're asking. For the excused absences, which are still listed as excused absences as they had been, you're asking that we just make sure documentation, which has always been requested, is continued, correct?
It's not in the definition.
It's not in the definition. And the second part is the suspensions with the expulsions, which I do agree as a school leader. So are you asking that should say suspensions and recommendation for expulsion? Because at that time.
No, expulsion shouldn't even be in there. It's not a type of absence.
Right,
You can't be absent when you expel. And another thing is with the data, they still collecting data on expulsions. Something's wrong. Since 2012, we could not expel a kid out of school.
thank you. Yes, Judge Ginsburg.
My question really goes to, it's loud enough without the mic. My question goes to simply these new rules and these policies that appear on the slide today. How did our unique system in New Orleans, will the Bessie Board put it in the school contracts, or how will the charter schools be obligated to abide by these rules?
Sorry, say again.
Charter schools in New Orleans, we have this unique system of all charter schools, and so that sometimes they would take attendance differently. These schools take attendance differently, and so that reporting might not be consistent. So my real question is, how is it that we can make certain that the charter schools, all of them, abide by these rules? Is it in their contracts?
Yes, I'm from New Orleans. Yes, it is in our contracts. There is no differentiation with attendance. Our attendances are taken the same way in all charters across the state, uploaded to the state elementary, high school. Now it will be just on a daily basis moving forward. Same accountability as every other school.
And one of the I believe one law is correct from that the courts should have access to this information. Now, what we used to have was a school attendance officer located at the court to gather this information on all of the cases. So is there any opportunity for us to have access to the information or the ability to acquire this information in the cases that we have?
Say accessing what type of information?
In having access to the computer system or having access to a person located someplace that we can call in any way that we would be able to obtain this information sort of regularly or when requested. I know that might seem like overburdensome, but regularly would be really good.
But you're asking that the courts can obtain the information on every kid or just by the school district? Because
Well, I'm really talking about every kid.
for every kid.
Every kid.
We would have to investigate that.
Okay.
Ms. Francis?
I would say that it depend, I'm one of the child welfare attendance truancy officers in Lafayette Parish, and it depends on the affidavit we submit to the court. The court doesn't have access to all of our students because all of our students aren't truant and for confidentiality reasons, as well as FERPA. So it would depend on your truancy officers to be able to submit those affidavits, and those are the cases that go before the district attorney and the judge.
Speaking first of the truancy.
Yeah, so another reason, one of the reasons that the policy was changed was for access and understandability and information of the policy. It provides more data to us at the state level. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Shonika Adams, to try and address some of the concerns raised by Ms. Pasqua.
All right, so in regards to the parent notes needing to be turned in, one of the things that we've been able to share is when you look at the current definition in our types of absences, when it talks about the non-exempted, so that's one of the streamlined there were two types of excused absences. You had exempted and non-exempt. And so with the non-exempt, that's the one where it actually says, excused absences are absences incurred due to a personal illness or a serious illness in family documented by acceptable excuses, including a parental note. One of the things that in speaking with some of our child welfare and attendance supervisors, we've discussed is when you have your attendance clerk call, are they documenting in the SIS what the parent says? And when they do, it actually fits the definition. So it's not necessarily that a parent note needs to be sent, although we would appreciate one. But when we find out the information by the attendance clerk or the person designated to correct the attendance information, and it is documented in the SIS, then it meets this definition. Now with us streamlining now to excused, unexcused, and suspension or expulsion, we don't have that differentiation. It is either we get a parent note or a doctor's excuse. Remember, one of the tenets of LDOE is our parents are our partners. So if our parents are giving us the information that we need, then that's how we're going to understand what's happening so that we can provide the correct services to support. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But I just wanted to address that this doesn't take away, but again, like Dr. Singleton says, it allows us to bring it all in for data integrity especially, but also making sure that people aren't confusing the language which was written here.
Ms. Francis?
We, in Lafayette Parish, we code our parent notes, as an unexcused absence. We do call and assess what's going on and we provide intervention, but we do not allow it to be an excused absence without some type of medical to back it up. But it does document it. So when we as the truancy officers pull that data and we see a bunch of code 54s, we will intervene and know that there's additional services. But are we saying that parent notes should be excused?
Yes, we are saying that parents' notes should be excused.
And how are we communicating this to our district?
Well, with this policy change, we have developed some guidance that we will be providing to you all in the next few weeks. Yes.
I just want to say that the revisions of the 4 definitions are unnecessary. They're inadequate. And they're convoluted, which means it makes the definition harder to figure out and understand. We are happy with our 4 definitions. You want to cut the 4 types of absence, you want to eliminate the word types. You want to call excused absences with exceptions. Well, you can call it what you want, but a duck is a duck. And if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, an exempted absence is an absence. There's 2 kinds of excused absence. An exempted absence is an absence. And we are told that we must continue to collect data that way. So we're going to still use the same codes that we have, and we still have to code it as an exemption. There's an exemption, there's non-exemption. The exemption is what the word means. You're exempted. You're exempted from going to school. You're exempted from compulsory attendance. You're exempted. You're not counted as one of the minimum days that you can miss school before you don't get promoted. That's what you exempt. You're exempt. That is a kind of absence. I don't care what you say. You can call it an exception if you want. We call it an exemption and we like it that way. And you have the non-exempt, that's the parent note. That's not a doctor's note. That's not what is listed in the exemptions. And we train, you're talking about the attendance clerk, the child welfare people in front office, we train them. We train them to collect data. We tell them all these definitions. We train them. We're responsible. We're responsible to the principals. We make sure the principals understand. So again, I only have a short time. I have it all written down why. But the bottom line is that our child welfare people, our supervisors, our directors, who are directly responsible for attendance in their school district. We make the programs, we enforce the programs, we work with the judges, we work with FINS, we work with family agencies, we work with the parents face to face. These kids have a face, these kids have a family, we see them, we know who they are. We say that these definitions are inadequate and convoluted, and we oppose them. Now, if they pass, we're professional people. We're gonna do whatever we have to do if they pass. But it's my job to convince the Bessie board that it means a lot to us. Now, I'm neutral in this. Like I said, I'm telling you, you want to know, this is the reason for this committee. This is the reason for this task force. This is an advisory committee. You want to know what all the stakeholders feel. I want you to remind you that Bulletin 741, 1105 is directly pointed at child welfare. That's what we do for a living. This is us. It's not for parents. This is our procedure for operations. This is our manual. And we want to tell you, you would be helpful if you could leave the definition as it is. You'd be helpful to us. That's all I want to say. You'd be helpful. Now, go ahead and vote like y'all want, but it would be helpful to keep what we got.
And so what I want to reiterate is that the parent note or the doctor's note would be considered an excused absence. There are many times where a student is missing school for one day and they don't go to the doctor. So in that instance, it would be an unexcused absence. But they don't go to the doctor maybe because it's a cold and we know the child has a cough for whatever reason. And so the student does not go to school. And so that should not preclude that from being just an unexcused absence. So what this does is it provides that a student personal illness, when we go back up to section 1103 with those lists, I'll get to you next over here. That can be an excused absence with that parent note, but that note still is submitted. And so we provide a list of items where the student is still provided that excused absence. We pretty much combined that, what was non-exempt and exempt, into this excused absence. So we just streamlined the policy for that particular reason. So it's not that we don't want a note. We still need a note. We need some reason why that student is not present. Ms. Ponder, you have a comment?
Thank you, Dr. Singleton. I want to thank you for the work this body has done. I'm new. This is my first time to attend. There has been an inconsistency for years from district to district, parish to parish about so many things, and one of them, of course, is the parent note. And in many places for years, the only excuse absence was with a medical, with the doctor. And I have 3 kids, and I guarantee you they did not go to the doctor every time they had a sniffy nose or anything like that. But there still are some questions remaining, I think, for the consistency, even within the parent note across, for instance, in East Baton Rouge Parish, they are allowed 5 parent notes per semester. And then I'm assuming that is okay, all right. My question is, if you have in East Baton Rouge Parish, I think that the way it's done is, suppose your child has a 2-day absence. They have a virus that lasts for 2 days. And when the child comes back in, reports to school and turns in a parent note, that has to be 2 parent notes, which counts for 2 of those 5 days. Am I correct on that?
Well, that's a local policy.
ma'am.
I can't answer
Okay.
that. So that would be a question for East Baton Rouge
Okay.
Parish as
And
to
I
whether or
think
not.
that's the question that I have, because I think that should be one. And that's a policy for the East Baton Rouge Parish to deal
is one.
with. But I mean, if you say a child is out for 5 days and just has, we have exceptions for chronic illness, those kind of health plans and those kind of things. But sometimes you have a virus, you just know what it is, and they might be out for 4 days. And that would be all of 4 of the 5, excuses. So we should address this at a local level.
Yes.
But you would approve as a board, as a body, to say that possibly could be one excuse?
again, that would be a local decision.
Thank
But
you, sir.
can I stop for a second? Because I'm listening to that. And again, as a school leader that sits in a school, I think that should be a standard across the state. And let me tell you why. Because if I have a parent and they can bring in a note for not going to the doctor, whatever it is, every time to make it an excuse absent, which does not count for truancy, that becomes a problem until they meet seat time issue. And so what helps schools to ward off truant, because they become truant until seat time comes. And so I think that standard should be, if we're gonna accept parent notes, there is a limit to how many parent notes. Otherwise, I'm getting notes every other day. And that is not helping children learn in the school, because at the end of the day, it is about you being in school, receiving the instruction until you can. And so I do believe that we have to be careful in how we're defining and what
Right.
our requirements.
And
I would
when,
like to hear
when they
from
are
you.
submitted as well, I mean, in our policy in East Bainbridge Parish, stipulates that a parent must submit a parent note within 5 days of the child returning to school.
Another,
However, we are seeing some situations where, parents are being able to turn in an excuse from back in October or November, and that is being excused. So, I mean, I agree. Thank you
there
so
should
much.
be
Dr.
limits, because
Dr.
they'll come
Clark.
with about 20 notes at the end of the school year
Exactly.
saying, I'm not making up seat time or whatever because of this. So I do believe that we should have how many parent notes? And again, this is my opinion. I'm one person on the committee. I would like to hear the opinions of other people on the committee so that we're representing everybody.
I think Mr. Russell had a comment.
Good morning, James Russell, Child Welfare and Attendance, Iberia Parish, also devoted member of Lockwood. There needs to be some sort of consistency statewide in the amount of days, not notes, not parent notes, amount of days that are going to be excused by parent note. Has to be some, because it's going to fluctuate. And parents will jump from parish to parish to take advantage of whatever number, who has the greatest number of days that could be missed based on, or excused rather, based on parent note. So there certainly needs to be some guidance on the amount of days that should be or to be excused by parent note.
Thank you. Mr. Kane?
Yes, and I just kind of want to follow up on the same thing because I'm hearing some of the discrepancies. Like Ms. Pender said that basically you have up to 10 days in EBR. Where I am, it's 3 days for the whole year. And so that was going to be my question until everybody started asking is, does local policy, even though you do provide notes, the discrepancy from district to district, does local policy apply in this situation? Meaning, if EBR's got 10 days, but this charter school has 3 days, are there going to be any issues with that with LDOE when we put this revised policy in place?
That is a local policy to determine how many parent notes or how many days. That is a local policy. Policy in 741 does not dictate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Grover, Judge Grover.
Yeah, so I have two questions or, comments. The gentleman here asked about definitions. And so changing the definitions to what is purported here does not prevent the local from having this is a question, the definition that they use. However, when reporting up, it needs to fall into the category that the state LDOE is requiring. So does it necessarily prevent the local from having sub-definitions to control the policies locally, but the administration still needs to fashion a way to make it accurately fit into the categories that are required when funneling up to report? That's my first question. My second question in our comment as to the parent notes, whether, and I go to Ms. Ponder's question about the consecutive days, whether or not a parent has, less than 2 consecutive days, then parent notes are sufficient. But when a child is reaching 3 or 4, whatever that number is, then it requires a doctor to know, because if a child is out that long, then it is reasonable to expect a parent to seek a higher level of excuse so that you don't have 5 days out. It's one continual set of circumstances. So it's one letter because that would seem irrational for seat time. However, if the child is truly sick and required to be out that amount of time, then it's not unreasonable to require that a parent seek medical so that that is a higher level of scrutiny. And it then can be qualified for 2 days, 1 note, but day 3, 4, and 5, if they're out for the same reason, then now you're up to your 3 letters regardless. I hope that makes sense.
And that's exactly what we do, judge the task, is that, which you, yeah.
Right.
So, just to address the first thing, rather than, the utilization of sub-definitions, that's the reason why they have their codes. Each system has individual codes that they can utilize to determine, that says why the student is out. And then those codes feed up to the definitions that we have here at the state. So they wouldn't necessarily need sub-definitions, but they would just utilize the codes and the definitions for those codes.
Thank you. I was just trying to I understood what he said, but in order to accommodate what he is saying, it's helpful to his crew, whether that is possible. And it sounds like it isn't. And I just needed to get clarification on that.
For Singleton.
Oh, wait, I want to bring up Ashley Townsend. She wants to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley Townsend, Deputy Chief of Policy. We did bring these policy revisions as a result of conversations from this group. When initially the group met, it felt that the information, the data that we were able to bring to start solving this issue of truancy just wasn't what y'all needed to be able to start looking at the issues and making those decisions. So we started looking at what data do you need? What will support you in best looking at how to solve the statewide issue of truancy? And this was one source of the confusion. So we said, let us do our part as LDOE and Bessie. Let us make sure that you have the information that you need to make these good decisions. And this is where the absences policy revision came from. In terms of local codes and definitions, being able to be what they need to be there, as long as they funnel up to the LDOE and our definitions, yes. There are lots of different reasons that a school might want to classify absences in different ways. And that's fine, depending on what makes the most sense in their own setting. But what we need at the state level is a little more streamlined, very clear, very targeted, something that will help us make sense whenever we're looking at this data statewide and all the different ways that we have to do. As far as the parent notes, our vision for that in this policy revision has been that while these absences would be excused by parent note, this should be something that school level, those people closest to the child are looking at. And so depending on the size of your system, that might not be possible for your local personnel to sit down with every child once they've had 3 parent notes and make that decision, but it might be. But really, once your system has decided, we're going to look at every child who has 5 parent notes and say, what's going on with this child? Let's dig in a little deeper. Are they having some health issues? Are there some family issues going on at home? How can we best support that student with being present in school? Then that's how that system is going to approach what this child has a parent who's writing a note. So that there's that issue that's solved, but let's dig in a little more deeply and see how we can support them versus we don't know where this child is. There's no reason for this absence. This family is not even attempting to explain why the child is not here. That's something that's a little bit different. And so I know we want to be really respectful of all of your time, and we're so thankful for your partnership in starting to solve this issue. And it really is so many different issues. Why aren't kids in school? Why aren't they in class? Why is truancy a big deal? You know, why is it such a huge problem? And so what we're hoping to do with all of you is be able to support you with good, clean data about who's at school, who's not at school. Suspended and expelled, yes, schools are still required to provide an instructional setting for students who are expelled. The difference there is they're not in attendance in that originally assigned school classroom. They're in attendance at the place to which they've been assigned through their suspension or expulsion designation. So if they are not in attendance at that setting where they've been assigned through suspension or expulsion, then they would be absent. So, but if they're in attendance at the place they're supposed to be, they're suspended, expelled, but they're attending over there. So again, I'm trying to consolidate several months of conversations into something that won't waste all of your time too much, but happy to talk more about this specific policy revision, the definitions, how we did consider all the different ramifications and implications of it. But that was just a little bit of the background that hopefully will be helpful to you all.
Mr. Kane?
I would like to pose a question to the judges. If you're sitting on the bench dealing with truancy on a given day, does it pose problems to you in resolving the issues if you have kids from multiple schools? I.e., we'll use Baton Rouge as an example. Kid comes in from EBR and they get 10 days. Kid comes in from charter school A and they only get 3. And so you're having to execute a different set of rules based on qualifying against truancy. I guess that's my question. If a parent poses to you, well, why does this child over here, my child's truant, but this child got more days than my child had access to? I'm asking about the continuity question.
Well, I just wanted to make sure the question, you frame it a little bit different because the definition for truancy is statewide.
Right.
So that's 5 days across the board for everybody.
But I guess
Unexcused, I'm sorry.
so I guess to rephrase my question, the definition for truancy is the same statewide, but the qualification for truancy is not. Meaning if a kid can get 10 parent notes in the same parish, whereas another school within that same parish, they only get 3, does that create a problem? And that's why I'm asking.
Okay, I was just a car because everybody who knows me here knows I twitch when people say truancy. Simply because going back into where we all want to really focus on is why are kids missing school? Whether it's excused, unexcused, or suspension, they should be in the classroom. And I think that's another reason why we wanted to streamline, because the goal is to stop chronic absenteeism. Because a doctor's note doesn't stop you from the learning loss. And that's what we want to really focus on, especially coming together. How do we take what we have now and kind of fix that issue? Because if we only focus on truancy, we're only focusing on students that don't have access. And so if we say our parent notes aren't good enough, what are we saying to families who culturally don't utilize medical personnel? What are we saying to families who don't have access to medical help? So I think I like the idea that the Judge Grover posed about what if we accepted a parent note, but also if it goes past so many days, where the expectation is a doctor, the next step, if that works within that family. Because think about it, with the new law with mental health days, isn't that a thing? The family can write a mental health note the first time, but after the second time, we're required to provide referrals to counseling services, right? So that's something to investigate. I would like to.
Ms. Francis?
I just wanted to say, just historically, I've been in child welfare and attendance for a little over 8 years. And historically, the parents who we're getting parent notes from are not our low SES parents. This is our parents in the more affluent community who are taking vacations. They're abusing it. So that's why we have not. And honestly, you know, I'm also a social worker. Whenever we identify a student under the unexcused absences meeting the criteria for truancy, we are intervening. Our parish is very intervention focused before even being punitive and submitting to court. We do have agencies as well as medical opportunities with sliding fee scales, free services, those kinds of things. But parent notes are not being sent in by the population that I think we're thinking are sending them in. They're being sent in from our more affluent families who's saying this is an educational field trip, or we're doing X, Y, Z, and that's where we've been getting the controversy. Lafayette Parish has a concerned parents group online, And they will publicly post in there, just do X, Y, Z, and you'll get it approved.
So what I'm hearing out of this conversation, which is great, a lovely, robust conversation. It is that we need to investigate across our state and see what's happening possibly in other states, the number of parent notes that are acceptable for an excused absence. Because right now we hear it's inconsistent across our school systems, and again, this is a local policy, so it could be changed locally. We don't have it in state policy that it has to be so many notes. So one thing that we're doing, the purpose of this body right now is to look at issues with attendance and awareness. And so that is one of the recommendations, one of our next steps that we can look at is, over the next few weeks, department staff will take this information, look at what is happening. Maybe we do a survey of all of our systems across the state to determine, East Baton Rouge is, would you say 5? Or they can only have 5 per semester. At Mr. Kane's school, it's 3. And another one, it might be 7 or 12 or 16. I don't know. But we can go back and try and figure that information out across the state. We can connect with other child welfare and attendance officers in our comparable states here in the South and come back to you all with some research that we found to say, how should Louisiana move forward with the idea of accepting a parent note? Because as Ms. Francis stated, they do it one way in Lafayette Parish and it's done differently in other parishes. So is that a fair, I see a few hands up, but I'm just wondering, is that a fair way to move forward? We do have some other topics we want to just get to on the agenda. And so I think we can spend a lot of time on this, but I don't want to silence you. But is that a good way for us to move forward?
It is.
So, Ms. Judge Grover.
I hate to leave without saying, he posed the question and not, I know we said we wanted him to reframe that question on what the judges would do with that. And we have to trust our local CWAs and our school systems on their definitions, policies when they come in. However, when they're in court and parents are partners and parents produce to judges or produce to myself issues or concerns on how the definition did not appropriately fit this youth as an absence or an unexcused absence, that is when we dig deeper and whether there's an exceptional circumstance, whether there is an order from the court to have assistance to have that child then see a doctor to get the classification so we can help children get their education and be in the seat. So it doesn't really matter if one of our charter schools is using 3 and EBR Parish is using 5 and Baker is using, we have so many districts, we're going to trust the CWA report until there is a reason to clarify whether it was actually an excused or unexcused absence. So that's the question in that. And as you do your investigation, I do believe that because of Louisiana and how we are situated, there are medical deserts. And so if we require the same everywhere, then the resources need to be the same everywhere. And that's not equity. Equity is really meeting your region, your district, where it is and the resources it has or doesn't have, and then hold people accountable to what is available. And if we get so concrete, then we end up being inequitable to a lot of children when we assume that they are using it for one reason, when we've not looked at the geography, we've not looked at the resources of families that we are attending to regarding their children. So as we do that, some schools have healthcare in schools. Some do not. Some families are living 20 miles from a healthcare center, and it's a day out of work because they're hourly wages. And so we would assume that these folks are salary parents and they're going to get paid what they're going to get paid, and that's not necessarily true. So I do appreciate local school districts knowing their area and setting their policies to meet the students that they serve and not get so caught up that we are now system-centered instead of student-centered.
Thank you. Mr. Pasqua, you had another comment?
Yeah, I brought the attendance law for Louisiana. I have created it on a card. And the only thing that's missing is one of your amendments that you have to proclamate an act that passed in 2022 about the pregnancy and giving 10-day minimum of 10 days after the childbirth. This is not on here because the State Department hadn't promulgated it yet. So I'm gonna give you a copy of our laws, and I could explain most of your questions.
Okay, well, I think Ms. Austin had a comment. Did you have a comment, Ms. Austin?
Yes, Karen Austin with DCFS, and Judge Grover touched on some of my questions related to youth in foster care. Because, you know, we do need the consistency, and I agree with the consistency across the state. We have youth that move several times within the school year, and I want to make sure those absences are counted as excused absences for them. But then we also have the fact that many of them they may take an entire day off school to travel to appointments, visits, court, things like that. So I wanted to know, with those parent letters or DCFS related activities considered a part of those parent letters, or is it automatically excused? Okay, great.
Those are excused. Yes. Yes. Okay, I think, Ms. Thompson.
So that can make one update there, the rule promulgation in response to the act that added the excused absences for the pregnant and parenting students. That was approved by Bessie at the March meeting. It was somewhat delayed due to the delay in the attendance policy that we had brought last March. But this March it was approved by Bessie, so that notice of intent period will start and it'll be final.
So with regard to that, Ms. Townsend, the notice of intent goes out for public comment, my concern. So if the gentleman's comments are submitted, that pathway, then they would automatically come back to Bessie for further review. Is that correct? So wouldn't that be the recommended approach to bring this back to Bessie? Okay.
Yeah, if someone so desires, they can go through the comment process for notice of intent. Yes.
Right. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. That's really your best opportunity to channel your input.
We have what they call Administrative Procedure Act, and we have a department called the Louisiana Register, which publishes once a month. It's around the 20th of the month, but a lot of times it's a little early on the 17th. And although these have been adopted in March, it hasn't been submitted to Louisiana Register in March. It hasn't been submitted in April, so it probably come out in May.
I think that's what the comment was there was a delay.
All right.
Maybe the
When-
council could give us. an
When it
update.
does come out, don't fool yourself. You don't have 90 days to comment. You have 20 days to comment. You have 70 days for the Bessie board to decide whether or not you're going to do something with those comments. And they have to be mailed in. And recently they allow you to hand deliver. It used to be that you only had to mail it in. I volunteered one time to hand it, and they said, you're wasting your time and your gas money. It has to be postmarked. So I already have my letter right here. I brought my letter for the Bessie board. This is what my letter is. All right. So I'm ready. But to answer some of your questions with the judges and so forth, first of all, you have to understand the law. You know, it's a hierarchy. You have your Constitution, you have your Supreme Court, you have your federal laws, you have your state laws, then you have your state laws, which will have policies, and then you have your local. The local cannot override anything that the state does or the Title IX or federal law, whatever it is. But they have a little leeway. And if they want to hurt themselves by making all these little things, like you can't turn in only 5 parent notes, and the law doesn't say that. This is what the law says. The law says that you have a minimum amount of days that you have to teach. The minimum is 177 days. Now, how many days can you miss before you fail? Well, For high school, they have courses, semesters. They have to attend at least 83.5 days per semester, and for 9 through 12, and KD8, 167 days. There's 177 teaching days, but you can miss 10 days and not fail. That's what the 10-day law is. You can miss 10 days. Now, you can do it by minutes also, all right? There's 63,720 minutes in instructional time minimum, and you can miss 60,120 minutes. So a lot of people figure it with minutes. So that's the law for everybody. That's the law for every parish. So what do you count? That's why the definitions come. Everything counts toward the number of minimum days you can miss, except one. And that's the exemption. And that's why it's called exemption. It doesn't count toward the minimum days that you can miss. Suspensions count. Excused count. Unexcused count. And if it's total 11, you fail. But that's not the only criteria for determining passing or failing. Attendance is like the fourth on the totem pole. You have pupil progression. If you repeat the grade, you can't fail at all. You can miss 1,000 days and you're not gonna fail because you can't repeat twice. You have SBLC, committee decides on a child, and you have special ed. Now, if you go through those three, then attendance kicked in. And we also have an appeal process. So you can even appeal and not fail. And it's up to the local district to decide whether or not to fail a kid. You have to find out in the appeal process why the kid missed so much school. But all what I hear about, you're limited to 5 days, you're limited to 3, that's the local doing that to themselves. Now, the Child Welfare Association, we're not a police, we don't enforce policy. We're not a policeman. We know some of the districts are doing some crazy things. The law says the State Department of Education must monitor, all right? When we ask them, they say they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the
Mr.
manpower.
Pasquale, we do hear your concerns. We want to move on just because we have people that need to get back to their
All right.
schools. But
So
we are
I'm
taking
just
into
trying to answer your
consideration-
questions, all
Right,
right?
and we are going to ask for the recommendation that we look at a standard to do the investigation for a standard across the state, making sure documentation is required and clearly state what documentation so that everybody is on the same page. But we'll consider all your concerns as we move forward so that we can get through our meeting today.
Did you have another comment?
Just to correct the record about the submission of the policy to the register, a few steps have to happen according to the Administrative Procedure Act prior to submission to the Louisiana Register. Those steps were completed according to our processes for engaging with Louisiana Fiscal Office and the other relative entities. That policy proposal was submitted on time and should be published in the Louisiana Register, expecting that tomorrow, but the timeline could vary according to other various factors.
Thank you. All right, so we do have a recommendation that came out of that robust discussion, is to look at what our school systems are doing across the state with regards to parent notes. We will also investigate what is occurring in comparable states across the South as well. All right, so we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a consideration of the City of Baker Schools attendance pilot. May I have a motion to accept this report? Moved by Judge Gerald Grover. Is there a second? I'll second. Seconded by Ms. Tana Francis to hear the consideration of the City of Baker Schools attendance pilot. I'm gonna turn over to Ms. Adams.
Greetings. I am so excited to share this project with you all that LDOE has been able to work on a pilot project in the City of Baker school systems, in which a partnership was done between LDOE, the City of Baker School Systems, and LSU Social Research and Evaluation Center. Those who join me on my monthly webinar know that we collectively are the Louisiana Attendance Alliance, and this pilot project was actually birthed out of that initiative. So why this pilot project? Just for the reason why we're here. Kids are missing too much school, right? So the need was demonstrated in Baker. Baker, upon looking at their data, their chronic absentee data, what we found was out of the 1,000 students that were that were in Baker during that school year, 2022 to 2023, 798 of those students had missed 7 days of school. Again, we weren't just looking at if it was unexcused. We were looking at how much time was missed out of school. 471 students, almost half, had missed 20 days of school. And so what we wanted to do is just really explore what's happening and how we can assist with this. Another thing that was brought out of this particular project, we not only wanted to look at the attendance, but also we know that our families are our gatekeepers when it comes to attendance. So one of the things that we've learned from the city of Baker is they self-reported that there are challenges to connecting with families so that they can better understand how to address those needs, learn the needs, and then how to address them. The next slide, you'll see, we were able to do an assessment, needs assessment. First, before we even got to the needs assessment, we wanted to understand that perspective. And we did an assessment, and what we learned, we wanted to understand barriers, aversions, and disengagements. We learned from the attendance works that these three things are the issues when it comes to attendance and absenteeism. So when we talk about barriers, that includes illness, family responsibilities, transportation, unmet basic needs. And when we talk about aversions, that's like school avoidance, depression, anxiety, bullying, negative school climate, parent concerns. When this was we still have some families that are concerned about COVID, and we want to make sure that their feelings weren't invalidated. Disengagement, poor relationships with teachers, chronic discipline patterns, student is overage, parents who don't support or value education. So we were able to not only meet with, this came from our, from students, from school staff, as well as some families as well. And so to break down that information a little bit more, you can see, you can't see up here, you can see in your slides, we were able to hone in what are some of the factors that were most impactful when it came to student attendance. And as you can see, family responsibilities was really big. These are things that we don't already think about. Another thing that we wanted to talk about was don't see the value in attendance. And that's one of the things we focus on with the Louisiana Attendance Alliance is how do we create a culture of good attendance practices in our classrooms, in our schools, in our districts, and even here at the state level. So our project goals were to build capacity in school systems to provide evidence-based tiered attendance interventions systematically and with fidelity. What that means is for my educators, you guys have been looking at academics and behavior using MTSS. So why aren't we looking at attendance through an MTSS lens? And MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. Apologies. But the other project goal was to build capacity in families to assist in building community and positive attendance culture. Again, our families are our gatekeepers. So we have to, again, make them partners in this work and work with them. And so when you go to our next goal, our next slide, I'm sorry, you'll see the project timeline. This work started in September. You'll see that what we were looking at is building school teams. When I first started here at LDOE, it was very important for me, and Dr. Singleton will tell you, is changing the narrative. If we're truly focused on fixing attendance in schools, then we have to look at all absences. And we started with educating those at the state level, and then we provided training at the system level, but we cannot focus on the trickle-down method. We have to get into our schools, and that's where this pilot project came into play. How can we create school attendance teams in our schools? And so in Baker, we were able to have our school team focus and our family engagement focus. And based off of that, we came up with some goals and objectives for each focus and in activities, and we had a proposed timeline. And so as you can see, This is the month of April, and we're heading into May. In May, the trainings are happening. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that we had some project activities that I wanted to share with you. The attendance action plan, that's something that all Louisiana Attendance Alliance participants have been able to participate with. In partnership with LDOE, LSU Social Research and Evaluation Center created a workbook. So we're not even expecting systems in schools to create a plan. We've given them a blueprint where it actually shows them in this workbook, how do you create an attendance team? But before you even start trying to create teams, how do you assess the needs of your community? How do you assess the needs of your school, your students, your families? Because how are you creating interventions and you don't even know what you're supporting? And next, we had, again, our family needs assessments. That's what we're learning, but also self-study. It is important for systems and schools to take ownership of this work. You'll never hear me say buy-in, because when you buy something, you can return it. But when you take ownership of something, you really care for it and it continues to pass and flourish. And so that's one of the things that was important for us when we try to consider how will we know this project is working. Improved attendance rates, and you'll see something on the next slide, but also improved school climate. We've done some climate, they've done some climate surveys there. And also recurring multi-tiered systems of support meetings. That means that people have taken ownership at the school level. They're meeting consistently. And even if there's turnover, the work still goes on. The next slide will show you that through this project, some amazing things have been happening. Baker High School improved their daily attendance rate from 70% to 90%. That means that they started to really engage. And how did they do that? One of the things that we learned during their self-study, because I do get a chance to meet with Baker and LSU Social Research and Evaluation Center pretty regularly to learn more about what's happening. And one of the things that's very valuable is allowing the system to, in taking ownership of this work, to do a self-study. And so what we learned is that they improved their tier 2 approaches to this, in their multi-tiered system of support. And tier 2 is more focus group. So tier 1, that's universal. Those are universal approaches in how you address attendance. Tier 2 is you identify groups of people. And so they identify groups of students that were chronically absent. And tier 3, that's really intensive. That's just, you've identified those students that are past moderately chronically absent. And so with them, they were able to increase their attendance rate by, again, improving tier 2. And one of the tier 2 interventions was the attendance success plans. All child welfare and attendance professionals in the state of Louisiana have access to attendance success plans that they can implement in their schools, but also teach their schools to implement so that it can be something that is done at the school level like it is being done at Baker High School. Attendance teams have been identified at each school in the city of Baker. They have an attendance team. What we are learning is we don't want schools to create another team. We understand that you have a SAT in your school, or you have SBLC, and you have PBIS teams already. What we're doing is we want to make sure that we are empowering our schools, giving a sense of agency, meaning we're empowering those teams already with how they can look at attendance with the work they're already doing. I mean, you're probably talking about the same student. All you need to do is, while we're looking at how we're going to address their academics, while we're looking at how they're going to address their behavior, let's also see if these days missed contributes to that behavior. These days missed contributes to the academics. Another thing that has happened already in Baker is professional development. Again, at the school level, attendance clerks were given their own professional development. Again, if we're really going to be intentional about data integrity, we have to make sure that the people that are cleaning up the data know exactly what they're doing and how to do it, but also making sure they know how to communicate that not only to our school leaders, but our families. Also, attendance 101 for all staff at each school. Again, attendance is for everybody. That's not a one person in the school job. It's not just on the attendance clerk, but everybody in the school has to take ownership. So I'm excited because the superintendent of Baker saw value in that and made sure that every staff member was provided professional development around attendance, because we all have I tell everybody, if you have any investment in a child at any school, then you are an attendance stakeholder. Administration of family assessments. Again, learning who our kids are. You cannot address the psychosocial needs of students if you are not understanding the psychosocial needs of their caregivers. Because again, our families are our gatekeepers. So we need to understand how we can support them so that we're ultimately supporting our students. And then I'm excited because I already saw the mid-year report, which is where I got the information about the improvement in attendance at Baker High. We'll get a final report in June of 2024. Thank you guys for listening. Do you have any questions about the project?
I do have one question.
Yes.
In the beginning, when you had the data of the absenteeism level in Baker school system and then seeing the improvement, was there any change in the definition of truancy along the way? I'm trying to see if this is apples to apples, that all of those things stayed consistent and it was really about the work
Yes.
of the pilot program.
Yes, because one thing that they have started to do is not just look at truancy. Part of the data analysis that happens in Baker is we're looking at chronic absenteeism. Because if you can, and they are using the guidance that we've provided at the department. So the definition of chronic absences right now is 15 days, but the U.S. Department of Education has provided guidance around utilization of 10%. So we're asking systems, when you run a report, look for students that have been missing for 10% of the current time. So guess what? If I'm catching kids the first month of school, you've missed 2 days, whether it's excused or unexcused. I catch you and you've already missed 10%, that's 2 days. I'm going to implement some type of intervention, whether it be tier 2 and making a phone call and finding out what's happening. This is how we can actually catch kids before they become truant. If you focus on chronic absence, you can actually solve your truancy problem, but also solve your attendance issue. And that's what we're learning in Baker. If we address all absences, we can actually catch that negative and really start doing the work around attendance.
If I may, I'm curious about where the guidance that you said came with about the 15 days. Where is that guidance coming from? Because it's inconsistent with the law in terms the law defines, not chronic, but the law defines habitual truancy as 5 days of absence or 5 days of tardy. And what that law also says is that at that point, the school shall, they shall report it. So I'm curious about, because that 15-day guidance has trickled down to Orleans Parish, and somehow they aren't reporting truancy until 15 days.
So that's not the same thing. So truancy is a separate definition, and that's our unexcused absences or unexcused tardies. So that's another issue in just looking, and we'll get to that in a minute too. Y'all get me ahead of myself. But we want to, what's happening is we're learning what's happening so that if we find out that the child was indeed absent and it was due to an extenuating circumstance, but it wasn't communicated properly that their family should send in a note, we can at least catch it before it becomes a truant day for that student. But here's the thing. What if that child is out and we find out that it was due to a mental health thing? Then we know what we need to do, so that we can, again, make it an extenuating circumstance, but also provide the referral needed so that it's not a continuous thing that's happening that's going to contribute to more absenteeism.
Appreciate the pilot and the report. That is exactly what we're trying to do on a small level in our truancy court. And it sounds like what Baker is doing on a much larger level it's very encouraging. So thank you for the report. I look forward to seeing the final report a little later, I guess, in the year. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments about the Baker pilot? All right, we will move on to the last portion of our agenda, which is a consideration of a discussion of attendance data. May I have a motion to receive such a report? Moved by Judge Gail Grover, second. Seconded by Mr. Winfrey. All right, so we want to talk about the data that we do have with regards to attendance right now, and this will kind of go between Ms. Adams and myself. She loves data. The first thing, we're going to talk about the data points that we do have that we address here at the agency. And she kind of talked about this in the average daily attendance, which is the average number of students that are present on any day in a school year. So we present this report, it's on our website, and it just tells you how many students were in school on any day. That's what that does. Doesn't give us anything else besides the number of students that were there. Then we have the attendance rate, which is the percent of enrolled, the instructional days, students were in attendance. And I'm going to have a chart on that next. So I'm just giving you all the definitions first. You can always come back to it. And then we have truancy, which is what Judge Dansberg was just talking about, which is a student is considered truant upon the 5th unexcused tardy or 5th unexcused absence in a semester. And that is defined in state law. So that's consistent across the state what truancy is. And finally, we have chronic absenteeism. A student is considered chronically absent upon the 15th absence in the school year. And that absence is any type of absence. Excused, unexcused, suspension, expulsion. So if they have 15 excused absences, they're still considered a chronically absent student because they are missing instructional time. They are suffering learning loss. And there is a belief that if you are, no matter how you are absent, you're suffering that learning loss. So you are not getting the academics that you need. So let's look at the different data points that we have. And so, as I stated, our data lags. So this is 22-23 data. You can see that across all of our school levels, our attendance rate was at 92%. So that looks pretty good. You think, oh, that's an A. You look at the elementary and middle and junior high school, they were both at 93%. Our high school and our combination schools are both at 91%, and our average was 92%. So it looks pretty good. And that's the attendance rate. And so then this was our truancy rate trend from 2018-19 through 22-23. You can see that in 2019-20, of course, it went way down, but that was our pandemic year. And then we slowly went back up. And at the end of last year, we were at 42.5%. So our truancy rate is pretty high. And our definition of truancy, of course, is the 5 unexcused tardies or 5 unexcused absences in a semester. And then finally, this is our chronic absence rate comparison. And this is just the last 2 years. The blue is 21-22, the orange is 22-23. So the overall, we went from 19% to 23% over that 2-year period. And that had a lot to do with our implementation of kindergarten, compulsory attendance with kindergarten. Surprisingly enough, a lot of kindergartners are absent a lot. And so that really made a difference with that number. So, you can look at the grade bands, you can see that the chronic absent students, of course, is higher on the high school level than it is on any other level, which is also kind of not surprising.
So I definitely want to bring your attention to this. This is sort of my plea for us looking at chronic absenteeism. Because again, when you look at truancy only, that includes tardies. The interventions you provide for a student that comes late every day will be different from an intervention you provide to a student that is not showing up at all. So when we look at chronic absenteeism, we're looking at students that are missing a whole lot of school. And I want to also show you how if we only focus on one thing, we can miss a lot. If you look at, I just pulled 4 random schools from around the state of Louisiana, school A, B, C, and D, and looked at their truancy versus their chronic absenteeism. So imagine we are all looking at these 4 schools and trying to determine which one has the best attendance, but we only look at truancy. School A, we'd be like, oh, they're good. We wouldn't even go and do any in-depth search around this school because they have a very low truancy rate, right? But look how many kids are actually missing school. Over 50% of their students are missing 10% of the school year, but they've controlled truancy. It sounds like to me, this might be one of those school systems where kids have access. I have excused absences. You get what I'm saying? Now, when we look at school B, we see that their truancy rate surpasses, who wanted to turn me off? We see that school B, their truancy rate surpasses their chronic absence rate, but it's still high. That truancy rate just tells me maybe our carpool line is long. Exactly. It's the inclusion of tardies. If we only focus on truancy, we're going to miss some kids. Kids that really need some intervention, families that really need some support, we're going to miss. And so we want to make sure, even look at the state, look at our state numbers. Louisiana is actually under the national chronic absence rate. We have always been, as a matter of fact, through the work that we've been doing with the Louisiana Attendance Alliance, Louisiana has been nationally recognized as the anomaly. Because we are actually looking at all absences. And so we continue to do better. Like she said, we only went up by 3 points, and that's because our compulsory age changed and we have a new group of kids that we have to educate their families. But when we just focus on truancy, again, we miss supporting all students. And that's why we wanted to make sure we use this sample comparison to show you how we can literally miss some people that in schools that need some support. And so if we look at the next slide, the reason why, if you looked at our recommendations that we had made originally, I forget what page that is. The first recommendation was to define chronically absent. Because like the judge was saying, you know, you were like, that's not in policy. And it's not, which is why one of our recommendations was to define chronically absent, because every state is using this. It is hard for us to find comparison data around truancy, because states have learned across the state that when one absence, you know, what I've learned in my research is one absence contributes to 1 point on a standardized test. That one absence doesn't mean is it excused or unexcused. So if our goal is to truly empower our kids and make their education a great experience, then we have to make sure that they're able to get there and learn why they're not there, whether it's excused or unexcused. And so the U.S. Department of Education defines being chronically absent as missing 10% of the school year for any reason, unexcused, excused, suspension. And this is the recommended definition. I've reached out to all of the professionals, from Hetty Chang of Attendance Works to Bob Balfines, Dr. Robert Balfines of the Everyone Graduates Center. 10%, this is how we find out who's missing too much school. Because achievement caps don't decrease with only addressing unexcused absences. All absences contribute to learning loss. And it actually, that's why the definition, the recommendation for defining being chronically absent was made as number one, because it's foundational for the rest of the recommendations. Yes, sir.
Exempted absences don't count. Just because it's excused, there's two kinds. An exempted absence is an absence.
Exactly.
Well, you said all absences count.
No, all absences contribute to learning loss.
No, you said all absences count toward chronic absences.
Yes, they
It
do.
does not.
It does.
Unexcused absences don't count. I mean, not unexcused, exempted absence. You got me saying it. Exemption absences don't, that's what the word exempted means. It doesn't count.
The U.S. Department of Education's formula for chronic absenteeism is excused, unexcused, and suspension. So that includes all absences.
For truant.
This is not truant. This is a kind of absence. They want to eliminate that. They want to say excuse absences with exemptions. But there is a type today, right now, because it hasn't been adopted yet. Right now, there's 4 types of absence. And there's a type called exempted. Exempted means it doesn't count.
It exempt, but for chronic absence, it would count toward the chronic absence total.
Well,
Yes. Correct. Expulsion is not in the definition of chronic absence includes all types of absences, whether it's excused exempted or excused non-exempted, because the student is not in school. So that's chronic absence. Any other questions or concerns about the data pieces? Or what data do you feel is missing?
Well, I just think if that's what it's being used across the nation, that it's just good, be a good policy to be consistent and not an outlier, so that every time there is a report, we're the asterisk with an exception at the bottom. So if that's what the USDOE is using, then I believe that that's what we should use.
I just wanted to ask for clarification on one of the data points you threw out. I didn't want to make sure it wasn't a hypothetical, but that was something y'all actually studied and determined a correlation. And that was that your one absence translates into 1 raw score point on the LEAP. You said standardized test, not LEAP,
Yes.
but I'm assuming that's LEAP.
Yes, I could send you the research that was done. That's not nothing I can do.
But we've actually done a statistical correlation, and it has been determined that across the population of Louisiana students, 1 absence typically translates into,
That was from a national study.
that was national. Thank you.
We can provide that to you if you would like.
And I think looking at the Louisiana high school, the comparison that you gave, I think the more standardized it is across the state for the schools, then the outliers wouldn't have, it wouldn't be such an outlier graph in who's doing what. It still seems like there's just, because if your school is taking on 3 parent notes for excuses, mine is taking 10, then our data is going to look different for the truancy and for the chronic absenteeism. So I think just, again, I'm going to recommend a standard of what is considered an absence, unexcused and excused, so that when we come to your court and you're looking at Sophie B. Wright might have 10, and I brought them to you, but this school actually has 20 based on an entire different definition of what it is. It's still not apples to apples, and it's not making sure that children are still where they need to be on a daily basis without excuses. I still go back to the fact that even when I looked at some of the reasons why students are out of school on the graph on page 13, and again, I just believe in certain standards should stay in place regardless of what happens. Because even when our students are in, like we say, the medical desert and certain situations, at the end of the day, the goal is to produce productive students that can function in society. And the gatekeepers are us. So I don't want us to get theory confused with being practitioners and making sure the practices are in place to ensure that students at the end of the day are being educated. If I got to choose not to go to school in high school, I probably wouldn't either because I did not feel at certain moments it was beneficial to me going out on Friday and Saturday to the football games, right? But good thing there were rules in place and they did not decrease those rules because of how we felt. And it was to make sure that I was going to get what I needed because I did not know better at that point in my life. And so I just want to make sure that we are focusing on what we are trying to produce and the end product and not get caught up in the process of producing an end product of great students in the state of Louisiana. So I'm just letting you know my stance on where we are and making sure that when we get all this data that the state is now going to pull on a daily basis, and that is a lot of work for the let's make sure that the data is something that we can actually use because it's equitable across the state of Louisiana.
Dr. Flock, it sounds, as you were speaking, it sounds as if what you're saying is applicable, very applicable for absenteeism. The extra caveat to truancy, because of the way it's written in the law, that brings parents into the court proceeding, juvenile justice proceeding, whereas absenteeism doesn't necessarily come to us. It may be a tagline under the causes for a child being truant, but because it is now an offense, and it even can be a criminal charge for parents, now you are infringing upon a child being removed from that parent. Ultimately, that could happen, or a parent spending time in jail. So we have to have some room to be able to build that in, like deserts or like whatever those other things are as judges, because to send a parent have the ability, the authority to incarcerate a parent it's not just about then students in seats. It's about the survival of the family unit, because it is that same parent that if we do and the judges have that authority, then that impinges upon the income of that family and all the other dynamics that are associated with that. So there is a split in the divide at some point between the truancy and the absenteeism. And I think that, the including things like a desert matters in truancy because it pulls that element out of the penalties, but including it in absenteeism then goes to a child being educated, that being the goal, and it can stand alone.
And let that parent know be part of the excusal process, but what is going to be our stand?
Ms. Francis?
I was just gonna say, if we're following what the Children's Code says in regards to truancy, there should be some interventions. We should not be just looking at bringing them to the judge. The school should have some documented, we do what's called a truancy pre-diversion contract, where we meet with families one-on-one, we assess what's going on, we put things in place. Is it on the part of the parent? Is it on the part of the school, and bring them together? And this is outside of an SBLC meeting. We do come to SBLC when there's an academic concern as well. But as truancy officers in Lafayette Parish, we are making sure that we're following Children's Code and we are putting interventions in place before it goes before the judge. And our judge, we have Judge Bro. When it goes before a judge, and let's say the parent, because this happens, while we're on the court floor, they introduce something that they've never told us about, we will recuse the submission at that time, and we will then remove it from the docket for that day, and then work with the family, even though they've gone before the judge on that day.
Other comments or concerns? Questions, things that we should be moving forward? I mean, I hear you all talk about, we have the conversation about chronic absence, so we still need to continue that discussion on how is it that we are utilizing that particular term here in our state. So I hear that. Is there anything else that you all feel that we should be investigating as we move forward so that when we do come back together, we have another robust discussion.
So first of all, I just want to again, just thank everyone for, engaging today. Your presence here, your comments are just truly valued by this group. And the only way we're going to get to the solution here is working together. And that's across the state. So I just sincerely want to thank each and every one of you for your time and your commitment, today and to your focus going forward. But I had several comments here I wanted to share. First of all, I just really appreciate the comments about standardizing across the state. You know, we got to have a consistent message. We got to have consistent metrics, something that everybody's bought into and we all believe in. So I appreciate the distinction between the chronic absenteeism and the truancy. It's two different. There are differences between the two, and there are significant differences, and they need to be addressed differently for appropriate reasons, as the judges pointed out. Also wanted to remind everyone about the notice of intent. There's an opportunity out there for you to comment on that, so that those comments do come back to Bessie and the board can consider those comments. I had a question for LDOE. I was really interested in seeing a presence here from the Attorney General's office. So I'm not sure if we have that today. If we do, I'd like to recognize that person.
No, he's not here. We did invite. We did do an invitation, but yes.
Okay, I think it's very important that we have the Attorney General's office engaged in this process. So I just want to communicate that from the perspective of Bessie to LDOE and to the Attorney General's office. Next question I had was with regard to the original recommendations that went to the previous Bessie. I'd like to know if this group is interested in entertaining another review of those recommendations and potentially presenting one or more of them back to the current Bessie for consideration. So I would ask that you guys consider that, another look at the original recommendations. And then specifically, I expressed a lot of interest last time in recommendation number 7, which was at our high schools, all the kids have the lanyards, they all have the badges all have barcodes on them. They use the barcodes for different reasons. I don't understand why we're not using the technology that's available to us. So they're swiping in and swiping out every day. It's going to be a standard practice, you know, going forward for business, industry. It's going to get to education. I think we should be on the forefront of that. It's going to eliminate a lot of this concern about inaccuracies and reporting and whatnot. The technology's there. It's not expensive. So I would hope that we review that one. And then my specific question is to the department is, would ESSER funding something that could potentially fund this? There's a significant amount of unspent ESSER funds left, I know, across the state, and they don't expire until the end of the year. So I'd like to know if those funds could be applicable here. Also, I'd asked previously about some sort of standard flow diagram that everyone can reference. So I appreciate the pilot work that was done at Baker. I'm wondering if LDOE could consider developing some sort of flow diagram so we can appreciate the process, the players that are involved, what their roles are, and so we could share that and we could reference that. Then my last question was, I was curious about an update from the EBR group. And I think Calcasieu and Tangipahoa, and maybe one other parish, had contracted with this software vendor. And I was curious if you guys might have an update on that.
Everyday Labs. Everyday Labs. It rolled down in East Baton Rouge Parish in February, and so far it's been pretty good results. As at that last meeting, we had a I guess a collaborative meeting with stakeholders in East Baton Rouge Parish. We find that it's a very positive thing that addresses tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So we are in the process now of looking at a new superintendent. So I think it will be incumbent upon the school board to include money in their budget to continue that program. I don't know if it will be up to the new superintendent judge, do you know? But as far as the program that our work, we found it very beneficial.
So I would ask this group if, you know, if you guys would consider, if you would consider bringing it back to this group, some sort of summary report, so we can appreciate what you guys have tried to do, and then what worked, what didn't work, if there's any takeaways there, so that, this group won't be trying to do something that didn't work, right? But yet we could potentially leverage something that did. So if you could give us that feedback when it's available, we'd sure like to hear it, I think. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. We definitely took notes of your comments and we'll be addressing those over the next few weeks. So when we do convene again, which I don't have a date yet, I'll get with the chair to find a date as to when we need to convene again. And then we'll be bringing back, the research that we have done in the interim as well as the comments from Mr. Morris. Is there anything else? Yes, Judge Grover.
Point of personal preference. The sooner, because of the dockets for the judges, the more likely we can stay engaged. Or if there is, you know, if Fridays are going to be the day, then we can be on the lookout at designating these times. So again, a point of personal preference on getting those dates so we can participate.
Yeah, okay, so we Friday, are you saying Fridays are better for you all as far as your schedule?
Right.
Okay. Consensus Fridays are better for people? That's good to know. So I will get with Dr. Clark and we will, as soon as we can get a date assigned, selected, we will get that, save the date out to you all.
And just to be clear, it is our goal to have this in place to implement the 24th.
Well, that depends on if we have that policy adopted or not. So I can't say that that will take place because of the timing of Bessie meetings as well as the notice of intent process.
Right, so just want to be 100% clear on this. This is a very high priority at Bessie. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of urgency. We want to work together on this collectively, and get something to the board, as soon as we feel like, we've got the right message. But let's just don't go to the board with something that's really not going to add value. Let's make sure that we've worked on this collectively. We've leveraged, you know, what we've learned to be best practices elsewhere. We've worked on this list we've talked about. We've got something that's material that we can bring to the board for consideration. But we'd certainly like to see something, before, as Dr. Clark said, that could be implemented before school starts.
And we want to thank you all for your attention and your time. Please safe travels on your way home and have a great day. Oh, I need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Mr. Russell, seconded by Ms. Austin. Thank you.
You